Is the PlayStation 4 dying? Is it going to die? Is it dying right now? Is the PS4 Pro being discontinued? There's a lot of questions to answer today and things I want to take a look at, some of which we have definitive answers to and some of which we have no answers to and only best guesses. Before we jump into this, I am going to point out, by the way, the subscribe button down there with the little bell next to it. Please be sure to hit that if you enjoyed today's video. Even if it's at the end, it means a lot to me. YouTube has not been sending out a lot of notifications lately, and I really appreciate it and appreciate you being here. So here's the thing with the PlayStation 4. This has been going strong for years, and anytime we have any new console generation, the old one is ultimately phased out, right? So we do have an immediate yes, eventually the PlayStation 4 will die. We know this. There's no exception to this. It always happens. That's why we don't see iPhone 1s walking around really anymore. Eventually support is dropped on this tech. It's why Xbox 360 games are no longer made in an official capacity. You might find, homebrew games, stuff like that, yes, but not official. Same with PlayStation 3. But when will that actually happen? I think that's the more fair question to ask, because the PlayStation 4 has sold, if you're looking at the normal and the Pro edition, as a platform, and you're going to hear me clicking around as well, because I want to get my numbers right whenever I cover this kind of stuff. There's a lot of numbers floating around, but it's really estimated to be about 113.5 million PlayStation 4s sold. And that is a lot, but here's the thing. That was actually in the 90s last year in 2019. So even through 2020, we had about 20 million of these things fly off the shelves between, the 2019 look and 2020. So that's the thing. There have been a lot of these that have just been sold to consumers. They're out there. They're in the wild. You have them in your home. Someone has them in their home. That's not going to be able to be taken away from you. But recently, one interesting thing happened with the PlayStation 4 Pro, and that was that it was delisted, kind of, on the actual PlayStation Direct site. Because if you go to direct.playstation.com, I'm going to leave a link in the description to where you would normally buy this. I'm not sponsored. It's just so you can go and see it. The PlayStation 4 Pro 1TB console is out of stock. And you're going to say, well, gee, that's not a big deal. It's probably in stock elsewhere. But this is the thing. This is Sony. This is PlayStation's official website. It's not in stock, and there are currently no plans to restock this item in the future. That is marked down by Sony on their own PlayStation website. The PlayStation brand has confirmed they have no plans to actually sell this model in the future. Now, there's a couple options here. Could we see a different PlayStation 4 Pro listing pop up on their site? Sure, but it's not likely because of where we're at. The PlayStation 5 has come out, and the fact that you can still buy the base PS4. As a platform, I do think this is indicative of what's going on. Now, some people are immediately thinking, well, that's it, it's dead. It's over, the PS4 is done, PS4 is over party. I'm going to go on Twitter, I'm going to let everybody know it died. I'm going to pour out some heartfelt condolences about this thing I never cared about until it happened to die, and just let everyone know how good of a person I am. But here's the thing with it, and if you got that joke, you're one of the real ones. You can buy this thing anywhere still. Yes, it's not widely available right now new. Even Amazon, a lot of them were marked up weirdly, but it is still available secondhand, and you can still directly buy the base PS4 model from Sony. So you can still get a PS4. However, it does seem to indicate a push towards the PlayStation 5 as a console, but here's the thing. It is not dead. The PS4 is not dead right now because they also did actually release information. This was in May of 2019 when they had an investor call that they believed that the PlayStation 4 would continue to push as one of their main drives of profitability and engagement until 2022. They actually said this. This was later on reported by actually pretty widely, but I'm looking at Tweaktown for this. This was something interesting because a lot of us weren't thinking that would be the case. Why would they have support through 2022 of this console? Yes, we see that with things like sports titles, but usually when a new generation comes out, it's barely a year maybe, and then that thing is, gone. We don't care anymore. Now, the PS4 is interesting though because it does have such a massive base compared to previous consoles that they dealt with. Obviously, the PS2 is going to be one of the all-time best, but gaming's getting bigger as well. So with this, what is going on with the PlayStation 4? I think that's worth taking a look at, because if you think it's dead, here's why you're wrong. I'm going to run through some things here really quick. There's a lot of things that I can look at, but still coming up in 2021, we have Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, coming back. We have Cyber Shadow. We have Little Nightmares 2. We have Persona 5 Strikers coming out in February. We have Taxi Chaos, that, what was it? Crazy Taxi, spiritual successor. I'm like losing my mind tonight. We have things like the Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake. It Takes Two. Disco Elysium, the final cut, coming out in 2021 on PS4. We have Nier Replicant coming out on PS4, which is supposedly not coming to PS5, but it is backwards compatible. Nier Automata was a huge seller. A new Guilty Gear game is coming. There is a lot actually happening here. Another thing that's interesting to me is Neo. We're getting Neo, The World Ends With You. I should clarify because I forgot there's also Neo itself. But this is a World Ends With You sequel that's coming to PS4 and Switch in 2021. And there's a ton more as well. So there is a massive amount of games still coming to the PS4, even Psychonauts 2. This is important to note because if the PlayStation 4 was actually dead right now, if this was dead in the water, we weren't getting anything, we'd be seeing a bunch of sports games and a couple of small releases here and there that are cross-generational. We're not seeing that. This seems to be a little bit more of a push than we saw with the PS3 to PS4 transition. With the PS3 to PS4 transition, there didn't seem to be cross-generational support for nearly as long. Yes, you could go back and play your PS3. I still do it. Honestly, I have a bunch of PS1 classics that are on that system, and also I have a bunch of PS3 games that I don't want to play on PS Now because I just don't like PS Now. It's pixely, I don't think it's very responsive, don't really like it. Yeah, that system is alive in the fact you can play it, but we're not seeing official games for it anymore. But with this, it does seem like there's a much bigger push to actually continue to release games on the PS4 all the way through the end of 2021. I don't see much marked for 2022 yet, but there are a few things as well that have been released by PushSquare.com, which is a big PlayStation fan site. They do a lot of good work with reporting stuff in regards to PlayStation games. And for 2022, they do have things like a new Grand Blue Fantasy, Sea of Stars, Sonzai, Baldo, the Procession to Calvary. These are to be announced, but since they haven't been announced yet for 2021, it's likely that they will be either really late 2021 or 2022. And the point I'm getting to here is that we are still seeing games releasing out into 2022. This is a good thing and a bad thing. The PS5 stock right now is garbage. It absolutely is. There's no getting around that. Yes, maybe you got one. I got one. I lucked out and I was able to get one. But not a lot of people have them comparatively to what people were expecting, actually, to what the consumer was expecting. I think the consumer was largely expecting that anybody could go out and get a PS5 near launch if they wanted to. If you didn't want to, not talking about you. The people who wanted one were expecting that everyone who wanted it could get it. That hasn't been the case. This has actually had problems with widespread scalping, reselling, with price gouging, with unavailability due to those factors, and also the pandemic, and all kinds of other stuff. And because of that, I do think that that is also pushing in this direction of keeping the PS4 around for longer because it has such a massive install base. 113 million people, plus however much it sells this year. I am sure it will sell, in 2021. I could see this thing selling another 10 million units. I could. Absolutely, because it sold 20 million between 2019 and 2020. That's pretty crazy, between the middle of 2019 and the middle of 2020. I could definitely see it continuing to sell at least the base model, people buying them, secondhand or from sellers that still have them new. The problem with this, and I'm picking my words carefully because some people get mad about this who are on the last generation of consoles, is how much of this comes out cross-generational and what effect that has. Are we going to see something like Cyberpunk again, where you have the last-gen version and it's just riddled with problems, it's very bare bones, it's just not the game you thought you were getting, But the PS5 version, well, I guess it's not the PS5 version, but the playing that game on a PS5 would work better. You know what I mean? Where the hardware of the last gen just can't handle this. Or maybe a game that is truly cross-generational, where it's really coming out on both right now at the same time, not Cyberpunk. Because Cyberpunk came out for PS4 and Xbox One. There is a next-gen version that is not out yet, technically, that is supposedly coming still. I want to see what happens with that after all this mess. But nevertheless, are you going to have something where, let's say, it's not coming out on both, but I'm just giving you an example because I don't know of a cross-generational game off the top of my head. Near Replicant, it is just coming out on PS4, but let's say it was coming out on PS4 and PS5, right? What do we have happen with that? Do we have a game where it is focused on being actually created for the PS4 and the PS5 is just nominal upgrades that don't really matter? And in that case, there's really no reason to buy it on that system, right? Why would you have it on the PS5? What's the point of next gen? Or do you do it the other way? Do you design it mainly for next gen and then the last gen version is a super stripped down version that doesn't run as well, doesn't have as much content? These are both kind of worries that people have with cross-generational stuff. And you even see that with Miles Morales that came out cross-generational. Yes, there are people who have played it on the PS4, and I'm not knocking that version, but a lot of people are like, I'll wait for the PS5. They just want the more impressive thing. So then it comes down to, is there a point in developing it for the last gen? Is the last gen holding back the next gen, or can they coexist well? I always thought that what should be happening is this. Games that don't need that PlayStation 5 push, right? Maybe they've been in development for a couple of years, because games are, usually, and they're coming out at the end of the PS4 life cycle. I always thought then you just make those games for the PS4. If PS5 players want to buy them, they can. They have backwards compatibility and they can play them on the 5, right? But you just make it for the 4 because then it is the focused experience and it is what you want to see on that console, right? You don't want to see the nerf version, the crap version, whatever. But then when something needs the push of the PS5 or it's going to benefit most from being there or it's supposed to be a technical showcase or anything like that, it's just made for the PS5 and there isn't a PS4 version. That was always my opinion of what should happen in these situations. I don't really like cross-generational stuff after the first few months because the cracks always start to show. You almost always have these examples of games where it's really good or it works really well on the new hardware. Like, for example, Cyberpunk on PC, right? Where we're running insane specs. And a lot of people who have a PC, their PC is comparable to a PS5. I know PC gamers are getting upset. I know a lot of you have way better than the PS5 specs. Not dissing you here. But a lot of PC gamers have like a PS5-ish PC specs, right? Here's the thing with that. On the PC, Cyberpunk's running pretty well. So we do have a bit of a determiner there. We have a little bit of a precedent to know that when there is a PS5 release on its own, that it's probably going to do a lot better than the PS4 version did, at least on the PS4, because that version itself even ran better on the 5, right? So that's kind of where it comes down to is, does the hardware hold the next thing back? Does the next thing push down and make the games on the previous thing suck? And how does that work? What do you want to see? I don't know. It's very confusing and complicated, and I understand that there are examples of games that work that way, that can be both cross-generational and work fine. Like Splinter Cell Double Agent was one of those, for example, back original Xbox to 360. Works fine. But there's also always going to be the sort of cyberpunk example where you have old tech really struggling to work with a new game, with new game design, with pushing these limits, because the limits have been pushed. We're years into a console life cycle, and there's not a lot more to see there. Anyways, I do not believe that the PlayStation 4 is dead. Will it die eventually? Yes. Could the PS4 Pro actually be discontinued because of its lack of availability and plans for the future on the site? Yes, I could see that as an absolute possibility, but PS4s will be around for years to come. Games will be around at the very least until mid-2022, from what I can tell. And there's plenty of reason to keep your PS4, especially if you want to be a little bit more of a late adopter to the PS5. I don't think there's really a rush to get it. I know you could say, well, Jay, you got it. I really got it for this because YouTube is kind of work to me. Yes, I love it, but it's still work. And I need it for that. But if you don't really feel like you need it, there's plenty on the PS4 to keep you occupied for now. And it seems like it has a couple years ahead of it still, and even longer after that until any online support is dropped. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you want the PS4 to stay alive? Do you want it to die and move on here within the next 6 months or year? What are your thoughts on cross-generational releases? I'm actually interested in that. Do you want cross-gen? Do you feel like it will hold things back, or that the sloppy seconds will be passed down to previous gen and you don't like that either? There's a lot of ways to look at that, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Please let me know in the comments down below what you're thinking about all these things. I really appreciate it. Subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and like the video if you enjoyed it as well. That helps me out a ton. I will see you in the next one. Have a fantastic day, everyone, and as always, stay shway.